Have you ever chased someone so hard, only to realize that the harder you run toward them, the further they drift away? Have you ever loved someone with your whole heart, given them your time, your energy, your loyalty, and still felt invisible? Today, I want to talk about what happens when a woman stops chasing, the moment when silence speaks louder than words, absence becomes undeniable, and the very person who took her for granted suddenly realizes what they lost. This is not just a story about love, it's a lesson about self-respect, worth, and the power of letting go. A woman's absence reveals her true value when her presence was taken for granted. This truth is one of the deepest emotional lessons in human relationships, yet it is often learned too late. When a woman is present, she gives her time, her energy, her laughter, her support, and her heart without keeping score. She doesn't measure how much she gives, she simply gives because she cares. Her presence becomes like air, always there, always reliable, always filling the empty spaces. The problem is that people often stop noticing the air until it becomes hard to breathe. In the same way, a man may not fully realize the worth of a woman who consistently shows up for him, because to him, her presence feels guaranteed. When a woman loves, she doesn't offer half of herself. She offers her whole being. She tries to understand his moods, supports his dreams, listens to his frustrations, forgives his flaws, and stands beside him even on days when he doesn't stand beside himself. Her presence is comforting, grounding, and healing, but when someone becomes used to being comforted, they sometimes forget to appreciate the comfort. When someone becomes used to being supported, they stop noticing the effort it takes. Her presence becomes invisible not because it lacks value, but because it becomes familiar, and familiarity can make even the most priceless things feel ordinary. Over time, a man who is emotionally immature or distracted might begin to take her presence for granted. He might ignore her messages because he assumes she'll text again. He might dismiss her concerns because he assumes she'll forgive him. He might neglect her feelings because he assumes she'll always understand. He begins to believe, even without saying it, that she will stay no matter how lightly he handles her heart. Her loyalty becomes his expectation. Her patience becomes his comfort zone. Her effort becomes something he assumes will always continue. What he doesn't see is the quiet exhaustion building inside her. She may not complain loudly. She may not argue every day. She may not fight for attention with chaos or anger. But every time she feels unheard, a piece of her steps back. Every time she feels unappreciated, a little more distance grows. Every time her presence is taken for granted, the strength of her attachment weakens. A woman rarely leaves suddenly. She leaves gradually, silently, in small emotional steps, long before she takes the physical one. Then comes the moment when she finally withdraws. It may look sudden, but it isn't. It's the final step in a journey he never paid attention to, and when her presence disappears, a shift happens that he cannot ignore. The silence he once created starts echoing back at him. The space she filled now feels painfully empty. The calls she used to make don't come. The messages she used to send don't appear. The emotional warmth she carried everywhere she went is suddenly gone, and he begins to feel the cold of her absence. In that emptiness, he begins to recognize her value. Her absence becomes the mirror that reflects everything he failed to appreciate. He notices how quiet his days have become without her laughter. He notices how unbalanced his life feels without her support. He remembers how safe her presence felt and how carelessly he treated it. The things he once overlooked become the things he now longs for. He realizes that presence is not guaranteed. It is a privilege, and he only realizes this because the privilege has been taken away. Her absence becomes the teacher he never asked for but desperately needs. It forces him to confront the truth. She wasn't just someone who stood beside him. She was someone who held him up in ways he never acknowledged. She wasn't just a part of his life, she was the part that made everything else smoother, warmer, and more meaningful. Her absence turns the invisible into the undeniable. It reveals the depth of what she gave, the weight of what she carried, and the sincerity of the love she offered. It exposes the difference between someone who was simply there and someone who genuinely mattered. And the most painful realization is that her value didn't increase when she left. It was always there. He just couldn't see it until she stopped giving it. When she stops chasing, a man is forced to confront the silence he created. This happens because for a long time, she was the one who carried the communication, kept the connection alive, and made the relationship feel warm. She checked on him, asked about his day, reminded him he mattered, and made small efforts that meant everything, even though they often went unnoticed. She reached out when he didn't. She apologized first, even when she wasn't wrong. She tried to fix things he didn't even acknowledge were broken. Her presence filled the gaps he left. Her voice softened the tension he caused. Her persistence kept the bond together when his inconsistency threatened to tear it apart. And because of this, he got comfortable. He assumed she would always be the one to bridge the silence, to mend the distance, to restart the conversations, to calm the storms. He didn't realize how much emotional weight she carried because she did it with love. But love becomes heavy when it's one-sided. She grew tired of being the only one who tried, tired of running towards someone who stood still, tired of speaking into a silence that swallowed her words. Men often believe a woman's patience is permanent. They think her effort is endless. They assume she will always reach out first, always forgive, always make space for their coldness. But they don't understand that every unanswered message, every ignored call, every careless, dismissive reaction is slowly teaching her how to live without them. Then one day, she stops chasing, not dramatically, not loudly, not with threats or warnings. She simply stops, and her silence becomes the one thing he never expected. For the first time, the conversation doesn't restart, the text doesn't arrive, the apology doesn't come. The emotional softness she once offered is replaced by quiet distance. And that silence hits him harder than any argument ever could. Silence has a power that words don't. It forces a person to hear their own thoughts, to feel their own emptiness, to confront the truth they've been avoiding. The silence she gives now is the silence he once gave her. The difference is that she's not using it as a weapon. She's using it as a boundary. When she stops chasing, he finally begins to notice how much she used to do. He realizes she was the one who kept everything flowing. He notices that the energy he thought just happened was actually her effort. The emotional warmth he enjoyed was created by her consistency. The stability he relied on was built from her patience. Her silence becomes a spotlight shining on everything he ignored. It highlights every moment he took her for granted. It magnifies every second he made her feel unimportant. It reminds him of the times she reached out while he pulled away, the moments she needed reassurance while he gave indifference, the nights she cried silently while he slept peacefully. Now the quiet makes him uncomfortable. Now the distance feels heavy. Now the lack of communication bothers him, because for the first time he has to sit with the emptiness he once forced her to feel. He begins questioning himself. He starts wondering if she's moved on, if she stopped caring, if someone else now speaks to her with the effort he never showed. Silence makes him imagine things he never cared to think about before. Silence makes him confront the consequences of his own behavior, and it's in this silence that he understands she wasn't asking for too much. She was asking for the bare minimum. Her silence is not punishment, it's protection. It's her heart retreating from someone who didn't cherish it. It's her soul stepping back from a person who didn't value it. It's her way of choosing peace over emotional exhaustion, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over one-sided love. And the moment she stops chasing, he begins to feel the loss of something he believed would never leave. He starts missing the texts he once ignored. He misses the care he once took lightly. He misses the emotional presence he didn't appreciate. But the silence she gives now is not something he can break easily, because once a woman learns to stop chasing, she also learns to stop accepting less than she deserves. And the silence he helped create becomes the silence he is now forced to live with. Distance becomes the mirror where a man finally sees his mistakes clearly. When they are close, emotions blur the truth. Routine hides the imbalances. Her constant presence shields him from noticing the damage he caused. When she is physically present and emotionally available, he doesn't feel the weight of his careless words, his lack of effort, or his indifference. She cushions every fall, softens every blow, and fills every quiet moment before it exposes the emptiness between them. But when she steps back, when she creates space, when she stops giving without limits, that same space becomes a reflection of everything he ignored. Distance does not lie the way words do. It reveals what consistency concealed. While she was close, he could overlook the nights she cried quietly beside him. He could ignore the times she looked at him searching for reassurance. He could pretend everything was fine because she was always there, always smoothing over the cracks, always finding ways to reconnect even when he drifted away. Her closeness allowed him to believe her patience was unlimited and her heart was unbreakable. But once she steps back, once the warmth fades, once the routine breaks, he can finally see what her silence actually meant. The distance forces him to notice the absence of her laughter, the stillness of her energy, and the loss of her gentle presence. Suddenly, the things he overlooked are the things he can't escape. Distance has a way of slowing everything down. When she's not reaching out first, he has more time to think. When she's not filling the conversation, he hears the silence. When she's not giving reminders of her love, he feels uncertainty. Space between two people creates room for thoughts he avoided. He starts replaying moments where she asked for a little more effort, a little more affection, a little more respect. And he sees his own dismissiveness in those memories. The distance becomes a magnifying glass, showing him the small selfish reactions, the unkind replies, the reckless attitude he once thought she'd tolerate forever. A man rarely sees his own behavior clearly in the middle of comfort. It is only when things become uncomfortable that he realizes the truth. Before, he believed she would always see past his mistakes. Now, in the distance, he sees how many mistakes he made. He realizes how many times he made her feel like an option while she made him a priority. He begins to understand how easily he took her emotional labor, her patience, and her kindness for granted. The mirror of distance shows him what he refused to see when she stood right in front of him, that she wasn't asking for too much, she was asking for the bare minimum, that she wasn't dramatic, she was hurting. That she wasn't demanding, she was starving for effort. Distance also forces maturity. Without her presence to distract him, he confronts the parts of himself he neglected. He notices how he relied on her for emotional support without offering any in return. He realizes how his inconsistency made her feel unsafe. He sees how his indecision drained her energy. In the space she created, he finally understands the depth of her loyalty, because now he has to imagine his life without it. And that imagination is sharp, painful, and awakening. What once felt ordinary now feels rare. What once felt guaranteed now feels fragile. The distance becomes a reminder of what he is at risk of losing permanently. He also begins to see her more clearly, not just as the woman who loved him, but as a human being who tried, who hoped, who showed up even when she felt unappreciated. In the distance, he sees her strength. He sees her resilience. He sees her worth in a way he never understood when he thought she would always stay, and he begins to feel the weight of every moment he didn't value her. Distance has a truth, telling power that closeness often hides. It strips away comfort, exposes reality, and forces reflection. And eventually, he realizes the most painful truth. The distance didn't change her value, it changed his ability to see it. A woman doesn't stop chasing out of weakness. She stops when she's done begging for what should have been given freely. It's not that she suddenly loses feelings or decides to punish. It's that she reaches the end of her endurance. For too long, she may have carried a burden that wasn't hers to carry alone. She gave love that was not reciprocated equally. She offered time, energy, and attention to someone who didn't recognize the value of her devotion. She invested in a relationship where effort flowed only from her side, and patience became the only currency she had to sustain it. Every apology she gave that went unacknowledged, every kind gesture that was ignored, every tear she shed in silence slowly built a quiet exhaustion inside her. She stops not because she's weak, but because she's strong enough to know her worth and refuses to settle for less. The act of chasing is emotionally taxing. A woman who chases must constantly put herself out there, risking rejection, disappointment, and indifference over and over again. She must speak first, call first, reach out first, and sometimes apologize first, even when she knows she was right. Every time she extends herself, she hopes for recognition, validation, and reciprocation, but when those things never come, it slowly chips away at her hope. She begins to see that the love she is giving is not being received as it deserves to be. Her energy is drained, her heart is tired, and her mind begins to calculate the cost of continuing. And then she realizes that no one can demand from her more than she can give, and that love should never feel like begging. She stops chasing because she understands that giving freely is not weakness, and leaving freely is not cruelty. She understands that loyalty is not a weapon, and that love cannot be forced. She stops because she knows that continuing to chase someone who does not value her is not an act of love toward him, but a betrayal of herself. She recognizes that her self-respect and peace of mind matter more than maintaining a connection with someone who consistently undervalues her presence. Every moment she spent chasing without acknowledgement, every effort she poured into silence, every hope she held onto despite disappointment, teaches her a lesson in discernment. Love must be mutual, or it will ultimately destroy her spirit. Her decision to stop chasing is not impulsive, it is deliberate. She has measured, reflected, and tested the waters. She has tried to communicate, to express her needs, and to nurture the relationship, and when she sees no change, she chooses herself. This choice is not a denial of her feelings, but a declaration of her priorities. She prioritizes her mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being over the comfort of someone else's inconsistency. She understands that true love comes without begging, without manipulation, and without the need for constant reassurance. She knows that if her presence is taken for granted, her absence will speak volumes louder than anything she could say while still chasing. Stopping the chase is also a powerful act of self-empowerment. It sends a message that her value is not negotiable. It communicates that she expects respect, effort, and reciprocity, and she will not settle for less. She walks away quietly, without drama, without threats, because she knows the strength lies in her choice, not in forcing someone to see her worth. And paradoxically, in this act of walking away, she often becomes the person the other misses most, not because of manipulation, but because absence reveals what presence was once taken for granted. The silence she leaves behind highlights the gap her effort once filled and forces reflection in the person who ignored her. Ultimately, a woman stops chasing when she recognizes that love is meant to be shared equally and that one-sided devotion is destructive. She stops because she is done negotiating her happiness for the sake of someone else's comfort. She stops because she has learned that her time, attention, and love are not disposable commodities, but treasures that deserve respect. She stops chasing because she chooses herself over the illusion of connection, peace over the chaos of neglect, and dignity over being undervalued. Her strength is not in staying and begging, but in leaving and knowing she deserved better than the treatment she endured. The moment she pulls back, he starts remembering everything he ignored. This is the point when absence begins to speak louder than presence ever did. When a woman steps away from someone who took her for granted, the dynamic changes completely. The effort that was once invisible becomes obvious, the patience that was once assumed becomes invaluable, and the love that was once overlooked becomes unforgettable. In everyday life, when someone is always there, it is easy to forget the small sacrifices, the little gestures, the quiet attentions that make a relationship meaningful. Consistency can blur into familiarity, and familiarity can dull appreciation. But when she is no longer chasing, when she stops showing up first, when she withdraws her energy, all the little things she did that went unnoticed begin to echo in his mind. He starts remembering the times she stayed up late waiting for him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He recalls the moments she encouraged him when everyone else doubted, the times she supported his dreams even when she faced her own struggles, and the nights she held back her frustration to keep the peace. He begins to see the countless little ways she expressed care, the texts she sent, the reminders she gave, the concern she showed even when he acted indifferent. Every single act, once taken for granted, now becomes a point of reflection. Her absence sharpens his awareness of what he overlooked while she was present, and the realization is unsettling because it forces him to face the truth of his own negligence. Memory becomes a mirror, reflecting not just her actions, but also his mistakes. He recalls the arguments he could have avoided, the harsh words he could have softened, the moments he could have prioritized her over his own comfort. He sees how many times he assumed she would forgive him, how many times he relied on her patience, and how often he dismissed her feelings as if they didn't matter. In the quiet of her absence, the weight of his behavior becomes undeniable. He begins to understand that what he once thought was normal or expected from her was actually extraordinary. He begins to realize that her loyalty, love, and effort were not obligations, but choices she made willingly, and he failed to honor them. He also begins to notice what he misses emotionally, not just practically. He misses the warmth of her presence, the comfort of her understanding, and the reassurance that came from her being attentive. He misses the feeling of being valued, of being seen not just as a partner, but as someone she genuinely cared about. He starts feeling the emptiness that her absence creates in his daily life. The routines he once took for granted, the late night conversations, the small acts of kindness, the spontaneous moments of joy, now seem impossibly important because they are gone. And the more he remembers, the more he realizes that those moments were not fleeting. They were the foundation of a connection he failed to nurture. This process of remembering is often painful. The realization that he overlooked her value, that he failed to appreciate her presence when he had it, can create regret, frustration, and longing. He begins to see the contrast between her efforts and his inaction. He remembers the times she went out of her way for him while he remained indifferent. He recalls the sacrifices she made, the compromises she accepted, and the patience she offered, and he recognizes that he did not reciprocate in equal measure. Her absence is a harsh teacher because it doesn't just show him what he misses, it shows him what he could have had he been attentive, grateful, and loving when it mattered most. Gradually, the memory of her presence turns into a realization of her irreplaceability. The man begins to understand that she was not just another person in his life. She was the one who brought balance, care, and depth to his world. Her absence illuminates her worth in a way that proximity never could, because it removes the distractions of comfort and routine. And in that space he starts to long for her, not in the way of casual desire, but in the way of recognition that what he had was rare, precious, and unique. He begins to grasp that her love and attention were gifts, and that he can no longer assume such devotion will be given freely without appreciation. In essence, when she pulls back, memory becomes clarity, and clarity brings both longing and regret. He finally understands the value of what he took for granted, and that understanding shapes his perception of her, himself, and what relationships truly require. The absence she creates forces him to confront the truth of his own behavior, the significance of her effort, and the magnitude of what he failed to recognize. And in this confrontation, he begins to see everything he ignored while she was still present. A man only realizes her loyalty, effort, and love when she no longer gives it to him. This is one of the most profound and painful truths in relationships, because human nature often underestimates what is constant until it becomes absent. When a woman consistently shows up, invests her time, and nurtures the connection, it can feel ordinary to someone who takes it for granted. The acts of loyalty are silent, steady, and rarely celebrated in the moment, but their absence is loud, undeniable, and haunting. A man can live day after day with her devotion without recognizing its true weight, until the day it stops and the emptiness she leaves forces him to confront what he ignored. This is not just about missing her presence, it's about understanding the depth of what she contributed to his life and how irreplaceable that contribution was. Loyalty is subtle, and it is often misunderstood. It does not shout or demand attention, it simply exists. She stands by him when circumstances are difficult, supports him when he is down, defends him when others doubt him, and remains committed when no one else does. Her loyalty is a quiet, steady force that shapes the relationship and makes him feel secure. He grows accustomed to this security and sometimes mistakes it for entitlement. He does not actively see the choices she makes to stay, the compromises she accepts, or the times she holds back frustration to preserve harmony. Her dedication becomes invisible because it is consistent, reliable, and unselfish. Only when it is gone does he realize that her loyalty was not something to be taken lightly. It was rare and valuable beyond measure. Effort, too, is often unnoticed until it disappears. A woman may spend hours thinking about him, preparing gestures of care, or ensuring he feels appreciated. She anticipates his needs, remembers the little details, and sacrifices her own convenience to make his life smoother. These actions are rarely dramatic, but they carry enormous emotional weight. When a man is unaware or indifferent, he might not notice how much of her energy is devoted to the relationship. It seems normal because it is constant, and humans have a tendency to normalize what is readily available. But when she stops putting in effort, the absence of it becomes glaring. The missed texts, the lack of reminders, the absence of thoughtful gestures, all of these gaps highlight the magnitude of what he once took for granted. Her disappearance of effort acts like a spotlight on his negligence, and the realization can be shocking. Love, in its truest form, is given without conditions or expectations, and a woman's love is often both abundant and patient. She loves deeply, forgives often, and gives herself fully without measuring the return. This love makes the man feel seen, valued, and secure, yet he may not recognize it because it flows so naturally from her. He assumes it will always be there, assuming that her heart is inexhaustible and her devotion unshakable. But when she withdraws, he feels the void her love once filled. He begins to understand that love is not just a feeling, it is action, consistency, and presence. He comes to realize that her love was not only rare but faltering, and that no replacement can imitate the depth and authenticity she offered. The truth is, people often learn value too late. The same man who failed to notice the little sacrifices, the consistent support, and the selfless love will now feel the weight of all that absence. He may try to recreate it, seek it elsewhere, or attempt to reclaim it, but it is impossible to manufacture what he once ignored. Loyalty, effort, and love cannot be forced after they have been withdrawn. They are only given freely, and their scarcity makes them precious. The moment she stops giving, he is confronted with the reality of his own behavior, the consequences of his indifference, and the magnitude of what he lost. The quiet presence he once disregarded becomes a vivid absence, echoing in every corner of his life. And in that silence, he begins to realize that she was not ordinary. She was extraordinary in her patience, her dedication, and her capacity to give without expectation. Her loyalty was unwavering, her effort relentless, and her love transformative. He now sees the reality that he may never encounter again. A woman who loved fully, cared deeply, and stayed even when it was hard. The absence she leaves is the reflection of her true worth, and it is only in this void that he comprehends the magnitude of what he ignored while it was right in front of him. In conclusion, the journey of love and relationships teaches us that true value is often hidden in the everyday moments of loyalty, effort, and care. When a woman stops chasing, steps back, or creates distance, it is not out of anger or weakness. It is a powerful reflection of self-respect, wisdom, and the understanding that love must be mutual to thrive. Her absence reveals what was once taken for granted. Her silence highlights what was once ignored, and her decision to stop chasing teaches the hard but invaluable lesson that presence and effort are not to be assumed. They are to be cherished. For the man who finally sees her worth, it is a mirror of his mistakes, a reminder of what he lost, and an awakening to the depth of love and loyalty he failed to honor. And for anyone witnessing or experiencing this journey, it is a call to recognize, appreciate, and nurture the hearts that choose to stay, before distance or silence teaches the lesson too late. I wish you the best of luck in your journey of growth, love, and understanding. May you always recognize the value of those who truly care for you, and may your heart be filled with gratitude and wisdom. Thank you for taking the time to reflect, listen, and embrace this message.